within the healthcare organizations. Please post your questions in the chat and we will address them at the end of this presentation. We would like to thank our chapter sponsors for their support for this program and our other educational events. Our charter member sponsors, Texas Children's Hospital, Houston Methodist, CHI, St. Luke's Health, Memorial Hermann Health System, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and HCA Houston Healthcare. And our Diamonds Plus sponsors, Medistar and the Intercontinental Houston Medical Center. Our platinum partners, Pearl Mayer, Page J. Tyler, Harris Health, University of Houston Clear Lake Center for Executive Education, Kindred Healthcare, Luminaire, and EEPB, as well as our silver sponsors, Texas A&M University, Brazos Sport College, Candio Partners, and the UT School of Public Health. Please note we have several upcoming exciting events of interest, all of which you can register for at our website, which is www.ache-setc.org. We will have our second quarter breakfast and panel on emergency management on Thursday, May the 6th. Please complete, and it will also be complete with the preceding networking session. We will have an opportunity to volunteer at the Houston Food Bank tomorrow morning, Saturday, April the 17th. And a speed networking event entitled Power of Networks featuring Mike McBride on Tuesday, April the 27th. And a not to miss humor happy hour with Andrew Carvin on Thursday, August the 26th. A number of other fun and exciting events are being set up for May, June, and July, so stay tuned. And also do not delay and register today. Please join our mailing list and LinkedIn group to keep in touch with upcoming events. Now I would like to introduce our panelists for this evening. Stacy Fremsky, MHA, Zachary Men, MD, MHA, MBA, Ravina Patel, MHA, and Alti Rahman, MHA, MBA. Ms. Fremsky, please take a few moments to tell the audience about you and your background.
Thank you, Marianne. Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacy again. I'm the Special Assistant to the Chief Operating Officer at University Health in San Antonio, Texas.
Thank you, Ms. Fremsky. Next, we have Dr. Men.
Sure. My name is Dr. Zach Men. I'm the Director of Value-Based Care for Houston Methodist Coordinated Care. That's our accountable care organization for the Houston Methodist Hospital System.
Thank you, Dr. Men. And next we have Ms. Patel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ravina Patel. I am the project manager for the Department of Pediatrics at Texas Children's Hospital. So I oversee operations for about 15 different pediatric subspecialties at Texas Children's.
Thank you, Ms. Patel. And lastly but not least, we have Dr. Rahman.
And just Alti Rahman, certainly not a physician, but so my background, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I'm the practice administrator for Oncology Consultants. We're a private cancer practice, about 28 providers operating out of 14 locations in Houston and 2 out of Corpus Christi. So my role is as the administrator, so essentially all areas of strategy, compliance, finance, operations directors. I work with them and I work directly with the board of our practice to keep the ship moving forward. So glad to be here and appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to the evening.
Okay, thank you very much to all of the panelists for joining us today. So the first question I would like to ask the panel is, what components of a cover letter or resume do preceptors mainly look for during the application process? We can start with Ms. Patel.
Great question. So first of all, 99% of the time, I will not look at a resume unless it has a cover letter. The 1% of the time that I do look at a resume without a cover letter is if that individual comes highly recommended from someone. And even then, I'll always give the feedback that you should probably always attach a cover letter to your resume. I personally think that, a cover letter is a great way to give a preceptor or a hiring manager a brief synopsis of your skills that you may not be able to capture in the bullets of a resume. So I think it's a great way to pitch yourself. Use your cover letter as a way to display, obviously, your writing skills, but also a way to give a synopsis of the skills that you can bring versus just the experience that you have listed on your resume. So most, resumes or cover letters, that I receive talk about how the individual is so impressed by Texas Children's or whatever organization that they're applying for, all of the accomplishments that the organization has made, and why the position is so interesting to that individual. That's great. That tells me that that individual did their research on the organization and is applying for a position that they're interested in, which is great. You probably wouldn't be applying for a position that you weren't interested to start with. So use your cover letter as a way to tell the preceptor or hiring manager about, how the skills that you have gained in your past experience can really apply in this position that you're applying for. Most internships and job postings will outline key skills and attributes that an applicant needs in order to be successful in that role. So use that cover letter as an example of, how you have demonstrated those skills in the past, in your past experience. So it doesn't always have to be, experience in healthcare. I, in fact, love picking applicants who don't have any experience in healthcare. And so what I really look for are the hard and soft skills that can, help an applicant be successful in my internship program. And so use that cover letter really as a way to get that point across, whether it's experience at school in a completely different industry. I think that there's always a way to kind of communicate that through your cover letter. And the same applies for your resume. I, of course, look for experience, but sometimes it's hard to identify, what skill sets an applicant has based on just a couple of bullets kind of highlighting the tasks or roles that they did in their experience. So try to find ways to really, creatively word your bullets to outline hard and soft skills that you applied in that position that apply to the role that you're applying for, whether it's an internship or a job. And so I think instead of copying and pasting the roles and responsibilities from a job posting, I typically look for a way or for interns or applicants who describe skills that they have demonstrated that I think will be helpful in the internship. So really get creative in how you list your experience.
Thank you, Ms. Patel. And would anyone else like to add on?
Well, I think Ms. Patel probably covered every aspect in ad nauseum detail, so I'm not sure I can add too much more value to that. But I can certainly echo some of those things, and I think Ms. Patel hit on the one of the things that I really look for is the soft skills versus technical skills, right? And I think that's so important to show that balance in that cover letter, showing a little bit that what you know about our organization already is always great. So that way, we're not feeling like, well, this is just kind of a copy and paste and send to 100 organizations and see who picks first, basically. I think, and I think as an early careerist, or if you're, in school right now, I think the technical skills, over the years, I've learned that perhaps technical skills is not going to be necessarily just fully matured or developed just yet, but I tried to find if there's certain soft skills that are in there. Ultimately, if the cover letter attempts to show kind of a balanced perspective on the person, we do try to, we're part of a smaller practice, and some of my colleagues here are part of larger organizations. So we have certain flexibilities in being able to, bring in, a few candidates at a time to do interviews. So, but certainly that cover letter and showing that balance is important. And also the cover letter, if sometimes you have a discrepancy between what's coming across in the cover letter and how the interview is going. So you really want to make sure you kind of match what you have in the letter, because sometimes there'll be perhaps an over kind of expression of a particular skill set. And then when we kind of elaborate on it further, as an intern, you're not expected to be an expert, actually. And if you are, then we obviously need to not hire you as an intern. So I think there's a lot of expectations maybe that maybe I should, add in some additional details to really we're looking for potential, where you could go, where we could teach you. But the attitude and personality has to come across in that soft skills aspect of it, you know? And if that's there, look, if you have the right attitude, certainly your degree is going to be foundational. But if you have the right attitude and you're pursuing that degree, then that's where we look at, okay, where could this person start and where could we envision them later on? So.
Thank you, Mr. Ramon. Mr. Ramon, would anyone else like to add on?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think they did a great job of covering it, but just to expand upon a few of their points, definitely get creative. I think that's, you know, like they said, this is your opportunity. I think given the audience that we have on the webinar today, you may not have any work skills or work background, right? You may not have much on your actual resume. So this is your possibly only opportunity, right? And if you're looking for an internship, you're trying to stand out from other people in your exact same position, right? So everyone is going, you know, trying to get the degree and going through it. So what have you done to make yourself stand out, right? What additional projects have you taken on? What case competitions have you been a part of? You know, speak to that to show that you truly want to not only get this degree, but be the best in your class, and you want to, you know, be the best, you know, candidate for this job in the future if you are applying for a position rather than an internship. So show a little bit of the passion in there. That's what I look for. If I see some passion in a letter, you can always tell through their writing. So yeah, get creative. I think that's good.
Thank you. And my next question is, what advice do you have for prospective interns to best prepare for an internship interview? Ms. Feremsky, we can start with you on this question.
Great, absolutely. There was 4 key areas that I kind of wanted to review with the group on this particular question. And the first one is audience for when you're in your interview. I think it's really important to understand your audience and the position that they hold in the organization, how you're going to present yourself if you're interviewing with the COO of an organization. It's going to be very different than if you're meeting with a department director and looking at possibly doing your internship in a specific department. So just make sure that you fully understand kind of how the organization is structured and kind of what the area of responsibility is for who you're going to be interviewing with. And that can help direct some of your answers to be more complete and kind of what they're looking for. The next part that kind of ties into that is researching the organization. Like University Health is a public entity. It's pretty easy to go and just Google our organization. You can find a ton on our website. But then you can also find Board of Managers meeting minutes. And that's a great place when you're interviewing in the public sector to kind of find out a little bit more in depth about what your organization's doing. Are they doing any capital improvement projects? It's good to know and pretty easy to find those out. The mission, vision, and value of the organization, make sure you're familiar with that and you can use some of the terminology that the organization uses in their mission, vision, and value to help you know, convey to your the person you're interviewing with that you've done the extra research and you've gone the mile and you know, you can see yourself in the culture of that organization. And using those keywords helps, you know, really convince the person you're interviewing with that you would be a good fit culturally in the organization. Because like the other panelists have mentioned, interns and early careerists, we know that you're not going to be an expert, but if you can show me that you can fit into the culture of the organization, that's a huge first step. The third part is be extremely familiar with your resume. Be able to, like we said before, we know you don't have a lot of experience, but when, for instance, we're talking about, tell me something you've done in project management or timeline, how you've kept a project on track. Go back and there's projects that you've done in school, or if you work in non-healthcare and you did a project or a process improvement where you're at, even if it's in a completely different industry than healthcare, try to look at those experiences and what you've been learning in the classroom and show that the fundamental structure of what you've done previously with a project, whether it's in school or with another organization, how that can fit into the organization that you're interviewing in. But I would have to say, I had a student use this and it was going really, really well. And they used physician fatigue, and that group project is how they kept the group on, on point for the project, and how they did time management. But then I said, okay, so what were your key takeaways from your physician burnout? And then they couldn't list the key takeaways that their group actually at the end figured out were reasons for physician burnout. So they had it all the way up until the end. So just make sure if you're going to use that, you practice it so you're prepared to answer follow-up questions. And then the fourth thing I would say is just know 3 or 4 areas of interest. Like we've said, we know that you're not a subject matter expert, but if you just go in and say, well, I'm open to learning everything, this is an internship. We know that, so you can definitely set yourself apart if you can go in there and say, I'm extremely interested in operations, and operations is so large, but within operations, I want to look at process improvement because I love lean methodology, or you want to work in quality because you love working with data. So try to, figure out some areas of interest that are a little bit narrower, because then if you are interviewing at, an organization and you're interviewing in the system to be precepted by an administrator that has purview over a large division in the system, it helps to narrow that down, because then we know where we could possibly fit you in the organization as an intern, and what value and what projects we could potentially give you to make the internship valuable.
Thank you so much for your insight. And would anyone else like to add on?
I would just like to echo what Stacy said about, identifying a couple of key areas that you're interested in. So in our internship program here at Texas Children's, we typically assign projects to interns based on, areas of operations that they're interested in. And it's oftentimes the interns that are like, I'll take anything, just give me whatever you have. I'm interested in learning about everything. That get, assigned the leftover projects that aren't as interesting or are more data heavy, and, you are not going to take away as many key skills from those projects. So really highlighting, what areas of operations or healthcare that you're really interested in is, I think, what, I'm just going to echo what Stacy said. It helps us place you in a project that's really going to help you grow and really develop some skills that are going to be beneficial throughout your career. And then another thing I'd like to add is always have a list of questions at the end of the interview. Obviously the interview is a way for the preceptor to get to know you, see if you're a good fit for the organization. But asking questions also helps you understand if you're going to be, or if that organization or that specific internship is a good fit for you. And will also, help the preceptor understand that you're engaged in the interview. I know that sometimes it's nerve-wracking to do an interview, but really, ensuring that you're still engaged and are actively thinking about follow-up questions, I think is something that I also look for when I'm interviewing interns.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And my next question is going to be, what kind of assignments or projects are interns typically given during an internship rotation? Mr. Rahman, we can start with you for this question.
So I think, being in private practice, there's a degree of flexibility and even creativity in the types of projects that you could be given. Our organizational structure, because we're not a large system, we're a private practice with many locations. So our organizational structure is fairly flat. So you in a private practice environment, you get to be very hands-on with projects. We give controlled access to multiple types of reporting systems, patient-facing systems, and like I said, all kind of controlled access to make sure you don't go in and do something unintentional. So what we like to do with projects is that, I think healthcare, as you guys are all learning right now, whatever textbook said about healthcare 5 years ago is very different now. So what I learned in graduate school in 2010 is in many ways, I'm in a continuous learning mode, basically, right? So as we're redefining strategy, there's a lot of work there that needs to be built in stages. And so we do have our interns involved in as high-level projects that relate to strategy or day-to-day operations. So it's, and you work across multiple people. We typically never have had a project where you're typically working with just one director. You could be working across service lines, across teams, and even across locations. Our model of how we provide cancer care is to be in different communities, different areas. So sometimes when you're rolling out projects or initiatives, it's really about trying to understand, well, how do you do that across multiple locations? So I feel like you get very ingrained in the practice culture. So I think the culture word has been mentioned many times here, and that's important to understand because that may not be for everyone. In a private practice environment, you do have to have a level of initiative and self-starter mentality, because we may have a problem, but it's not a fully fleshed out problem. It's a problem, and we need your help and we'll work with you, give you the guidance and the structure to flesh out the problem into its objectives into its goals into deliverables. I love what was mentioned by one of my colleagues about process improvement. My background is I'm a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, and we're very much about trying to follow a very regimented process in rolling out initiatives. So you're very much ingrained in a private practice environment, and part of that is just by design. Private practice, we're typically involved. The managers, no matter even at my level or at the director's level, we can be handling very complex things to very day-to-day types of things as well, and our interns can be involved across that spectrum of complexity as well too.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question, what would you consider the most challenging aspect of an internship?
I think it's time management, because we do like for our interns to be able to complete a project, not just have kind of well, here's a project and let's see kind of how it goes, right? So if we have a new initiative or some sort of a complementary or an ongoing project that needs continuous momentum and support, I think we try to come up with deadlines and goals that fit with your schedule, because we understand that you have exams, you have your coursework, so we're trying to balance that. Well, how many hours can you dedicate to a particular project? Because I could have 3, 4, 5 different projects, but it's a matter of trying to find someone. Particular project may only need 5 hours a week, some need 10, some need 20. So it's trying to match that person to a particular project, because an intern, a potential intern can let us know that, hey, they're looking for an operations project. Well, my operations project could be a 20-hour-a-week project because it's, operations is complex. So I think that we find we do find students have challenges because you're wanting to get a lot of experience, but that experience is going to require some hours to put in as well. And how you're going to be able to balance that with also meeting the rigors of your curriculum as well too. But I think as long as the big thing is if you have a self-awareness, and what I mean by self-awareness is that you have to know your ability, how much time you need to focus on your schoolwork. And you have to be realistic with yourself about that. You may be excited about wanting to join a particular organization and put in the amount of time, but if you start, focusing less on schoolwork and more on the project, or vice versa, you're going to end up harming yourself one way or the other. So I think self-reflection and self-awareness is a lifelong process. So you do have to be aware of and be realistic. And I would probably factor in, if you think that you need, 15 hours a week for schoolwork, maybe factor in a couple of extra hours into that to really give yourself the time to focus on the internship as well. Because what you don't want to do is overpromise and say that, yep, I got this, I can do this project, it's so exciting. And you come in and all of a sudden the 20 hours a week goes to 5 because, you have exams and things like that. So, it's okay as long as you set that expectation in the beginning. And that's what I always ask, like, hey, this is the project, this is what I'm looking at, and it's going to be X number of hours a week. Can you do this? And if you say no, that's fine. At least we have that expectation down in the beginning and we can work around that, right? But if you say you're going to do it and you don't, that can be a very challenging way to start off an internship. And that's really your foot in the door, right? It could lead to your first opportunity, your first job. But it's okay. We understand that you have work, you have your coursework, you have work-life balance that you have to look at here, and just be realistic with yourself.
Thank you very much for that. And would anyone else like to add on?
Sure, I could talk a little bit about more to the first question of what kind of projects would you expect. For our internships, it's very different. It depends on the person, depends on the type of internships. We've had people rotate through our department from high school volunteers that wanted an internship to medical students to actual internal medicine residents that were doing a elective rotation in value-based care. So because we're an accountable care organization, we are the Department of Population Health. And we work with not only the employed primary care physicians who are part of Houston Methodist, but there are many aligned physicians, so independent practices in the community that are participating in our Medicare Shared Savings Program or our other value-based care programs. I bring all this up and get into the detail because it really talks to the different opportunities that we have. We're doing a lot of quality improvement, and quality is different every way that you kind of measure it. So each program has their different definition of quality, and we do get a lot of data in to make sure that we're improving on our quality outcomes for each of the patients that we're responsible for. So with different people coming in, we've had from Dr. Buckley, actually, he sent me one last year, a student that came in. And I asked her, what are you interested in? What do you, want to do with your degree? And she looked me in the face and said, I want to be a chief nursing officer, because she was an RN background. And I said, cool, let's do it. And I have a team of RNs that actually they're all BSNs, but nurses that I lead that do telephonic outreach to patients after discharge. They work with them for 30 days. They'll reach out to some that are high risk and work with them for 90 days. And I said, okay, as a manager, supervisor of nurses, I just got this project put on my desk, and I'm going to give it to you as if it was, the same way that it was given to me. And let's see, where do you start? And so I gave her a pretty tough project to actually start from the beginning and work on, give me a number of patients that a single nurse can handle, and base it on literature that you see, that you read. Give me a lit search, go through there, talk to each of the nurses, talk to other people in different programs across our department, and see what is a fair number. And then we can see if we can implement that and see how it works. We'll measure it and then come back to it at the end and see if that was the right number. And we were able to actually go through the entire process as you would being a manager of nurses, with a new responsibility and a duty to kind of go out there and do it. And so that was actually really, really successful. And we're still using that number of patients to nurse ratio today. It's a year later. And so now I have another intern coming from Texas A&M, And I asked her, what do you want to do when you start? And she said, I love data. I love data analytics and digging through it. And I said, great, we've got a ton of data on all of our individual projects. So let's look at how you want to measure a new project that I was just given. Let's see how we're going to put it in place. So it really is, at least with ours, we have so many different avenues to go in that we try to tailor our internship around where people want to go and what they want to do with their degree.
Thank you so much for that. My next question is going to be, what is the best way for an intern to network during their internship? Mr. Rahman, we can begin with you on this question.
So I think, you know, our projects are can be across service line, across different disciplines of the practice. And my role, if it's an internship that's starting in administration, and I need to help support one of our service lines or functions, then what I'm going to do is set you up with introductions, and I will help bridge that connection. I won't leave it on you to be like, oh yeah, this person's name is Chris, and here's the email address, and just go reach out to him. That's awkward. It's been actually done to me, and it's really awkward. So I made sure to never do that to anyone else. So I always feel like I'm gonna help make the introduction, whether it's via email or whether it's face-to-face. That way they know that there's an expectation and that you'll be working with them. Now, from there on, that's where you have to really start working on, you know, your communications and being able to, you know, start fleshing out the project, see what drives that particular area, what their goals are. And you'll meet, and they're going to introduce you to their staff and their team. So it's important to get to know them. I think you know, unfortunately, COVID has put us all behind cameras at this point, but during non-COVID times, there was a time where we would meet face to face, you know, and I was joking with some of my colleagues earlier today that once meetings start face to face again, I'm not sure I know how to socialize again. I think I'm just going to be awkward. My hands are going to be all over the place. And but that's an important part. Your body language, the way you speak to them, the way you listen is so important. And taking notes. You're going to be learning a lot, and it's important to take. I can't emphasize the note part enough, because if you have someone, if you're working with different leaders of the practice and they're repeating themselves because you didn't take notes the first time, that can be frustrating. So you start building those relationships across the practice. And you know, we've been fortunate to have many internships over the years turn into roles in the practice, simply because we were like, you know what, we never thought about this type of area. Maybe we need this type of role. Maybe we create a position for it, you know? So I think it's important to look at each person that you come across, whether they're senior managers, not so senior managers, frontline. You never know who has influence there that could come back and be like, oh no, we need this person. So network with everyone, frontline managers, physicians. You know, it's important, because if you're looking, if you feel like that's the organization you want to be in the future, then guess what? You just met all the different peers that you're going to have. So so it's important to be kind of self-driven at that point, because once you develop all those connections, you're going to see your project be able to progress a lot faster too. So I think that's you know, the networking part is wonderful, and I think hopefully we'll all be able to get back to where we're meeting each other again, and not just through webcams, because we have current interns right now that are unfortunately having to meet more through webcams, and there's only a certain amount of emojis that you can use to express your personality. So, but I think, you know, that's the way we navigate now, but I think the way we navigate will hopefully start to have some semblance of normality in the coming months here.
Most definitely, and thank you so much for that insight. And would anyone else like to add on? Okay, so we can go on to the next question. So what can interns do to build a good relationship with their preceptor? Dr. Zachary Ment, we can start with you on this question.
Sure. So I think there's a lot of good points that have already been mentioned that will relate over to this. Just going back to the previous statements about taking notes. So if you're having, a meeting with your preceptor, show that you're interested in what they're talking about, right? Show that you're interested in a part of the team and really kind of taking on any of the projects they give you. But at the same time, don't be afraid to ask questions. That goes back to the same thing with, the interview. That shows interest. If we as preceptors are going to set aside our time for your learning, your education to really build you up as an individual and a potential candidate for, positions of the future, really show that you're interested in what we are doing and how you can be kind of the best intern you can be. And I think the main way to do that is ask questions about anything that you don't understand. Don't be scared to ask questions. That, is one thing I think is a misconception. Some people think if you ask questions, it is something that you should have known in the first place. We understand that you are interns. You're not, as they said before, supposed to be subject matter experts walking in. So ask questions, take notes, take an interest. Back to the networking question, while you're here, take advantage of your time. And so if there's a time between, meetings that you're a part of and doing projects for, the direct preceptor you're with, ask for time with other people within the department. Ask if there's anything else or anyone else that you can meet with in the organization that may be able to help you with your project or help you to understand a little bit more about the organization in general. But I think showing a true interest in what the person does, what the organization does, and trying to immerse yourself as much as possible in the culture, the outcomes, and everything that the team is doing and that department is doing really goes a long way, at least with me.
Thank you for that. And would anyone else like to add on?
I can kind of echo exactly what Dr. Menton said. I think that to build a good relationship with your preceptor, you do have to, make them feel like you have an interest in the organization and, what you're assigned. Because like I said, I assign projects based on, the skills that I think an intern can gain from, whatever interest that they've kind of shared they have. And so really showing that you have a genuine interest in the projects that you've been assigned to, in, learning more about what your preceptor does on a daily basis and just the overall organization. And, you may be assigned a specific project, but, maybe go to your preceptor and ask, what other opportunities do you have available for me that will help me learn and also will help, take some work off of your plate, I think is a really good way to build that strong relationship with your preceptor and also, gain additional skills that you might not have gained through your project that you've been assigned to.
Thank you so much for that. And my next question is going to be, how can interns take advantage of all their resources during an internship? Ms. Fremsky, we can start with you.
Sure. The first thing I wanted to touch on with this topic is, really treat every opportunity as an opportunity to learn. Whether the project is small or it's big in scope, there's always something that you can gain from it. And it could be a soft skill or it could really be a technical skill. So just treat every opportunity that you're given as learning, even if it's just going on rounds or you have some downtime in between your meetings. Look for those opportunities to just get out in the organization and do some rounding on your own. Because then when you do have a one-on-one with your preceptor, you can start to throw in like, on top of all the projects, when you're doing a project update, you can talk about extra stuff that you're able to do to really show the interest that you have in the organization. And just echoing what Ravina and Dr. Min said, your preceptor and other leaders in the organization are a huge, huge resource. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And in fact, you kind of freak us out a little when you're not asking questions, because then we're not sure that you're, that you're understanding or gaining anything. So we understand, the first week you're trying to feel everyone out and see kind of how the pieces in the puzzle fit together. And so you're probably going to be a little bit more shy. But, try to get out there and ask questions. There really is, all the questions are meaningful. And so that sort of engagement with your preceptor is going to just help you get that professional relationship, not to be so awkward. It'll kind of get into a routine. And the other thing I think is to know your weaknesses. We all have strengths and weaknesses. So don't be afraid to take on a project that is going to force you to work on something that you would consider a weakness. So for instance, if finance isn't your strong suit, don't be afraid to take on a project where you have to do some financial analysis. It's, it's going to be tough for you if it's a project where it's your weakness, but I really believe you really grow from those. Same thing could be public speaking. Find your peers in the organization. If you have to do a public speaking project, they're going to help you out in the organization and say, hey, can I run my project past you? And can I run through my slides with you and practice? It's, your peers and your cohort that may be in the organization at the time really will help you. You just have to have that relationship with them. And the other one that I wanted to mention that's a huge resource is, in part of your shadowing that you do, don't be afraid to shadow clinical areas and really focus on the conversations that you have with clinicians and medical terminology, and the ability that you have to be able to have a conversation with clinicians will help you in the long run. And part of that is truly shadowing those departments. University Health is trauma, but we're also academic. So a lot of our clinicians love it when administrative residents go to shadow their area, because they know that they're going to be future leaders in the organization. And so they actually capitalize on that time because they want the administrators to know what they're doing, because decisions that you can make as an administrator will directly affect your clinicians. So the more that you really understand what they're doing and ask them questions, why do you do that test? Or what's the difference between, test 1 and test 2? They'll take the time to teach you that. And so I think that that's a huge, huge resource that I really try to push residents towards.
Thank you for that. And would anyone else like to add on?
Something that I'd like to add. So in our internship at Texas Children's, we typically have anywhere from like 3 to 5 different interns at one time. I know that might be a little bit different than some of the other programs, but I think one of the resources at Texas Children's that's oftentimes undervalued through our internship is your peers. And so, all of our interns are working on different projects. They all come from different backgrounds, different graduate programs and schools. But the thing that I always ask an intern when they come to my office and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? Or, show me how to find the resources to do something. I'll ask, which one of your peers did you ask first? Because oftentimes I find that the other interns in the program are really great resources and have answers to the questions that the intern who's coming to me is asking. And I was actually an intern in our program about 3 years ago. And I found that as an intern, I really learned the most from my peers in the program who came from different backgrounds and really had different perspectives and different skills that I was able to kind of, learn off of. So I think that's a really good resource as well.
Thank you so much. And my next question is going to be, what can a student do to become a more attractive candidate for an internship if they were not selected the first round? And Ms. Patel, we can start with you once again for this question.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that I look for if I don't select an intern for the first round is whether that candidate asks for feedback. So whether you're applying for an internship or a job, most preceptors and even hiring managers will really appreciate and value when a candidate asks for feedback. So don't think that you're bothering them. That's really an opportunity to learn and grow from your first experience. You spent so much time and energy applying and interviewing for an internship. And I personally think that it's the least that a preceptor can do when they don't pick someone for a spot in their internship. Sometimes it might take a little bit of time to get that feedback back to you, but I always take the time to provide some feedback to help that that applicant learn and grow. And I think that it really helps that initial person stand out the second time around. Something that, I look for in the second round is if I find a name that I recognize, I'll look for the recommendations that I, gave that intern to see if they implemented some of those things. And so that really helps someone stand out the second time around for me.
Thank you so much for that insight. And would anyone else like to add on? Okay, and so with our next question, what changes can prospective interns expect in their internship based off of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic? Dr. Men, we can begin with you on this question.
So I think we've touched on some of that already. It's a lot less face-to-face, a lot less face-to-face interactions. A lot of meetings are going to be, WebExes or, Zoom meetings. Get used to making sure you know how to mute your phone and unmute your phone, right? Those kind of things. But overall, at least in our organization, we have plenty of space and plenty of how do I say it? Meetings that are still happening in small conference rooms, masked up. We have just a few people gathering there. You'll still have plenty of one-on-one time with your preceptor. And so there hasn't been much change there. None of our actual projects have slowed down. I mean, we still have our goals. We still have our needs. If anything, a lot of the hospital systems took a big hit last year. So we are, challenged with how do we rebound from this? How do we overcome some of the issues that we had last year financially? So there's pressure on every single department to perform, to improve. And so we have a lot of projects that we still need to get going. And so I think what may be different is you may have more innovative projects this year. Everyone's looking for the best way to change and improve. So if anything, this year and next year, you may be stepping into more innovative projects or programs that are handed your way. And you'll get to see really kind of how healthcare changes so quickly. At least in our department, I feel like we are constantly trying to say, what's the next best thing that we can do? How can we look around to other systems, other ACOs, other things that we learn in different conferences that we attend and say, oh, wow, they're doing something different that we haven't done before. I mean, y'all all know Houston Methodist tagline, leading medicine. Like, we live by that, though. We want to be the leading edge, and we want to be the ones that people reach out to, for oh, we're doing the next cool thing. So we're constantly thinking about that, and it would be really neat as an intern to come in and say, oh wow, no one has thought about this. You're the first ones doing it. So I think if anything, some of the projects may be, you're doing it for the first time and you may not have a lot of other information out there from other systems doing it. So I think that's probably going to be the biggest difference, a little bit of WebEx and a lot of very different projects that, they're pilots, it's not recreating something. Let's pilot it and see how it goes. And so you'll get to actually see for us a project from start to finish, and track the outcomes and really have something to show at the end of it.
Thank you so much for that. Does anyone else have any other insight to add on?
Yeah, I think we're in a phase of transition from web-based, virtual-based to hopefully having some more personal interactions and meetings. Certainly trying to manage a project virtually, it's different challenges, and it absolutely can be done, and we've been doing it throughout the early stages of the pandemic, even up till now. I think being comfortable with technology, I think even whatever this post-pandemic world will look like, I think there's certain things in the virtual world that are going to be here to stay from a convenience standpoint, and being able to jump on a quick web call, because many times being able to meet in person requires conference rooms and meeting spaces. Sometimes you just need to have a very quick touch base, and that's what technology is going to offer us, to be able to see each other for just a minute or two without having to get up from our respective offices and find spaces to meet at. So I think it's good that I think businesses, in my opinion, will be able to move perhaps a little bit more efficiently, being able to combine some of the virtual technology. So definitely don't lose the skills that you've gotten in online instructions, online learning, being able to share files, send files. Those are things that, as you're learning it right now for your graduate coursework, for your schoolwork, I think you're going to be using some similar skill sets even in the workplace as well too.
And I would encourage during this, as we're coming out of COVID-19, try to go to the CMS website, the state and local and the federal. With the pandemic, how we're delivering healthcare right now is rapidly changing, and CMS makes provisions based off of what is going on. So a lot of organizations are starting, if they weren't heavy into telehealth, for instance, they are now moving more towards that model. So I'd encourage you to look at what's going on in the state and federal on that side of the house. And I think that would help during the interview process, as well as during an internship, because you're then able to help with the project and understand what the regulatory compliance is to that project.
Thank you for that. And now a final question for all of our panelists. What is a piece of advice you wish someone would have told you when you were in this stage of your career?
I can start. So I think that something I wish someone told me in grad school, or just coming out of grad school, was don't be afraid to ask questions. There are no stupid questions. I know you hear that a lot, but it's true. I never frowned on an intern for asking what an acronym is, or how to do something. And when I first got into the internship at Texas Children's in grad school, I was so scared to ask questions. And oftentimes that kind of hindered my ability to gain skills or experiences that, could have really helped me. And that was, some of the feedback that I received from my preceptor as I went through the internship program. And as I took her feedback, I really did feel like as I was more comfortable asking questions, I was able to, get more out of my internship experience. So I think that that's something I wish I knew coming out of it. Don't ever be afraid to raise your hand in a meeting and ask a question.
Yeah, I think Ms. Patel has a great point. Be comfortable with yourself. You don't have to know all the answers. And it's very easy to tell when you're trying to be someone that you're not intending to be. You should be comfortable with who you are. And once you embrace that, that's when you're going to truly let kind of the knowledge and the learning and the kind of who you are as a person be known by others. People want to know who you are. And I think early on in my experience, it was like, oh, well, I'm doing this type of project. That means I need to be like this, I need to act like this. I need to talk like that. Growing up, I was naturally an awkward kid, and in some ways still very awkward, and that's okay. And in my organization, people actually enjoyed that for some odd reason. So, and so I think it's important to embrace who you are and be okay with not knowing an answer. And we have a little phrase on the back of our badges, our work badges, called "Let me ask," and the idea behind "Let me ask" is, and it goes according to what Ms. Patel was saying, is that it's dangerous when you make up your own answer, and it comes from a place that is, you're just trying to impress someone or sound like you know something. And if you're working with someone who expects you to know everything, my frank and honest opinion is get out of there and don't be in that environment, because you're not expected to know everything, and you will make mistakes, absolutely, and you learn from that. And it's, education is a lifelong experience. You don't get to become a CEO or whatever higher role you're in, and all of a sudden you know everything. So just treat life as a learning process and be comfortable with who you are, and that's how you'll grow and develop.
And just to echo on that, I completely agree. I think that comfort in yourself leads to confidence, confidence leads to charisma, and charisma will take you actually very far. But at the same time, fake charisma makes you look like a salesperson. So that's why you can't just fake charisma. You have to be comfortable with yourself and confident in what you do know. Make sure you're confident in what you do know, not, you think you know everything. So that's where you kind of have to balance it. Comfort in who you are and what you know. But the other piece of advice that I wish I would have known is you've got to hustle. I think, everyone on this webinar is already a step ahead of the rest of your classmates not on the webinar, because the jobs aren't just going to fall into your lap as soon as you kind of get out of school. So take that step. Try to hustle for an internship, get an internship, try to hustle for a job while you're there. I mean, you really have to push and push and push to get, where you want to go.
And the thing that I would add to what my peers have already said is, once you land your internship, every single day you're interviewing for a position. The 90s are gone, and we don't, in healthcare, create positions anymore because, we really like you as a person. We want to see what value you can bring to the organization and how you fit in and you complement our team. And so I think that one of the things, I had quite a bit of projects when I was a resident. And when I would hit kind of a roadblock, I would just want to figure it out myself because I was afraid to ask for advice or a question. And I really think that I want to encourage you guys, as you're going through an internship. If you hit a roadblock, you're not by yourself. That's why you have a preceptor. That's why you have us. And so then there's nothing wrong with asking questions. And I don't want you to go home and stress all night long, because then you won't have work-life balance because you're trying to figure out a way around a barrier. Ask us for help, and we're wanting to help you. That's part of teaching, and you're actually teaching us something too.
Thank you all so much for your insight. That concludes our panel discussion. We will now be going over to questions from the chat. So panelists, the question that we had was, with an MHA degree with a healthcare background, what internships and process improvement do you recommend?
So that's go ahead, please. That's just an interesting question to try to find specifically an internship in process improvement. I think a lot of the internships, at least, the ones that I've seen are very broad. And like I said on ours, I mean, we can steer it towards process improvement, if you want, but I think trying to find something that matches your background would be great. If you get the MHA degree and you have a clinical background, try to find something that has a clinical part to the team that you're working with. But I'll turn it over to some of my colleagues.
Yeah, I think process improvement is, you can find it across really any discipline in an organization, healthcare or not healthcare. So I think process improvement is it's the thing about process improvement is that and I'll give my experience. I've been in some organizations where process improvement was not a part of the culture. So therefore, the department heads or areas that I was working in, well, it's already working as perfect as it is. And so what improvement are we going to find there? So I think that there's a question even before that, right? Because it's assuming that there's process improvements to be had. So I think that's the first assessment you have to do as an intern, is that because if you go in and say, well, let's fix this process, let's fix that process. And if there's a ingrained culture of, or in maybe in a particular department that, look, this is the way, I love this statement, this is the way we've always done it, you know? And that statement, that tells you right there that perhaps that's not a place where you're going to find a process improvement related project. So, but you're going to find process improvement be part of almost anything that you do, because it doesn't have to always be direct patient care where you find process improvements. Everything has it. So I don't think you're going to have so much of an issue finding a particular internship with that. It's more about, does the culture embrace process improvement as an initiative?
Thank you for that. And another question we had in the chat was, what do you wear to an interview?
I think that you should always, dress for the job that you want and not the job that you have. So if you want to be a CEO, like 20, 30 years down the line, then I expect you to wear a blazer, some nice slacks, and, just look as professional as you can. I will, whether you're a man or a woman, I will always recommend that you have a blazer on, and just, look as professional as you can. Don't ever come into an interview with like a t-shirt and, casual pants on. I don't think you're impressing anyone by doing that. And that goes for virtual interviews these days too. Always dress to impress.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I would also add to that, remember your posture and your facial expressions. That's going to go a long way in an interview as well. And, no one's asking you to wear Brooks Brothers to an interview. We know you're an early careerist, but, like Ravina was saying, definitely a jacket. A lot of times with COVID now, the ties have kind of gone away. In quite a few of the organizations because you don't wash them very regularly. But making sure that your clothes fit is a big thing too. I've noticed some residents, the clothes are either super baggy or super tight. So you're conservative in your dress, and conservative is the best approach.
Thank you. And another question we had was, can you address conduct in a virtual environment? Please refer to it as, people refer to it as netiquette. Netiquette.
So I can start. Always mute, please. I'm OCD about this. Anytime I'm on any kind of meeting, the first thing I do is open up the participants and I watch the microphones. And so if I see an echo and I see it's coming from your microphone, there's automatic judgment. Even if it's me, I judge myself if I'm the one, right? And so please make sure you've got the mute. Make sure you're watching for the double mute if you're talking and your phone is, you're muted on the computer, but your phone is off. Those kind of things. But it just shows a level of professionalism. And to me, it shows attention to detail. I'm very big on attention to detail. I know it's taking it back to like 9 questions ago, but on your cover letter as well, I'm looking for attention to detail. If I see, problems with, spacing and periods and commas and things like that, I'm looking because, take a chance to review it, give it to somebody else to review. But definitely for virtual meetings, mute and watch yourself.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the virtual environment, and of course, being in healthcare, you're a lot of people are still in the office. I know with my role, where even though I'm not direct patient facing, I'm in the office with our physicians, our nurses, our medical team, and there's some days where I'm at home. And what's interesting is that there's when you get to see someone in there, not in the professional environment, but in their home environment, just know that what you have in your background creates part of your personality, So for example, I'm at my parents' house because it's Friday and they need some help. And I realize over my left shoulder, I have my old toys. So just be careful in terms of what you have in your background, because it's not that it'll create a bad impression of you. Just know that it's going to supplement the impression that people have of you. And it could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what you have. If you have a bunch of hardcore rock music album posters and stuff in your background, just know that whatever you have in your background is going to be taken into account into that overall personality and communications that you're putting across. So I think this virtual world has really kind of, in some ways, you're inviting someone into your home, right? Unless you're in the office. So you have to balance making sure that you look professional as if you are in the office, and find a good background if you don't want someone to know something that's more personal about you.
I think another thing to note is, especially when you have your camera on during virtual meetings, people can tell when you're not engaged or are doing something else. We can see when you have different windows popping up, you see the reflection in your glasses, or your face lighting up brighter because you opened another window. So just, keep that in mind. People can tell even though you're not there in person, whether you're engaged or not in a meeting, even if it's virtual. So.
Thank you. And our next question is, what are good places to look for internships? I have checked LinkedIn and hospital websites. I want to make sure I'm not missing any good resources for internship positions.
I would say your school. Talk to your professors, talk to your internship directors, like make that good connection with your school. We get direct outreach from program directors from most of the universities, and I think that's the best way to go, because when we talk to them, we get their recommendations as well. So always treat them very nicely, do your best to perform, and work with them because they work with us.
Yeah, I would
couldn't agree
say
more with that.
definitely like networking with ACHE or HFMA. I mean, you should be involved as a student, and when you start either a BHA or an MHA program, you should have your internship in your mind from the beginning of that program, because there's stuff you can do in between semesters that's not an official internship, but it can help give you experience while you're working up to the phase of an official internship in your degree plan.
I would also suggest networking with your classmates. If you're participating in the student version of any of these organizations, if you're first starting, your first semester there, your first year there, get to know the upperclassmen, get to know the ones that are going out to do their internships or residency, because while they're in that internship, when you start looking for one, they could, make that recommendation of, oh, hey, I have somebody, if they made a good impression, they could call their former preceptor and say, there's somebody that, is from my school. They're, doing a really great job. They want to intern there as well. How do they apply? How do they get involved there? And then at the same time, some people who have finished their internships may already have a position there. They have an entry-level position. So always network with your classmates, because you never know who's going to be the one that you need to call someday for a job, not just for, the first internship, but down the line. You should always keep in touch with all of your classmates.
Thank you. And another question that we had is, what's the difference between an outstanding interviewee versus another candidate?
That's a great question. I think, I think we touched on some points earlier. One of the points I made was be comfortable with yourself, right? We can see that. We're not necessarily looking for who's, got the sharpest and smartest technical skill set. We're trying to get to know you as a person. There's minimum requirements, right? The types of in our projects, we're looking for those graduate candidates. So you're already in the door because of that, right? Now what else? What's going to make you stand out from a personality standpoint? It's your ability to relate to people, to listen to them, to be able to empathize and echo and mirror what they're saying as well. I think it goes a long way when you're able to, when I'm interviewing someone and they know about our organization, whether it's through our website or social media, so you start building a connection like, hey, I don't really need to say, well, this is who we are. One of the things that is always can be disappointing is like, when I have to be like, well, do you know who we are? It's like, no, I heard about you. I know your name, and my professor gave me this, that you guys were looking at getting interns, and I have to be like, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about who we are, right? That doesn't show that maybe you're not interested. You're just trying to see who's going to say yes first. So I think my colleagues, I think several of us have said that getting to know the organization, a little bit about them and why you think it'd be a good fit. It's finding a place to do an internship and eventually a job is a two-way street. We may like you and be like, oh my God, this person would be great in our organization. You may not like us, and that's fine. And that's okay. And it could be the other way around, is that you like us, but we don't like you. So it's a two-way street. So make sure you're getting a chance to, really study what the organization about. At the surface level, do you identify with what they're doing, or are you just looking for someone just to get in there and get some experience? You should identify with what they're doing as a mission, because you'll enjoy it a lot more. I know we all want experience and we all want to make sure we grow, but you have to be able to identify with the organization, with your own values and cultural constructs that you're looking for.
Thank you. Another question that we had was, what do you recommend to do volunteer and job-wise the summer before your residency semester, sorry.
We don't, since we're a private practice, I'll leave it to my my hospital colleagues to answer this.
I think this is kind of a tough question. It really is dependent on what you're interested in. I think that if you've done a good job in your application, during your interview, that I don't really know what else you can do to help yourself stand out. I think that obviously showing that you've done volunteer work and things like that are great, but don't necessarily always add to the skills that can help you succeed in an internship. And so really, I think, again, going back to the first question, making your resume and cover letter help you stand out. So highlighting the skills that you have versus, just bulleting out your experience. What did you take away from that experience? Someone can have years and years of experience, but is it relevant? And are the skills that they gained during those experiences going to be beneficial to the internship program, is really what I look for, versus all of the different types of experience that you have, or how many years of experience that someone has.
Thank you. And another one was, an inspirational individual once mentioned that you should show up to work before your preceptor and stay later than your preceptor. How important is this in making a great impression and showing your dedication?
I kind of disagree with that.
100%.
I always tell our interns, don't feel like you have to be here the earliest or stay the latest. I understand that you have a life and school and family probably outside of work that you care a lot about and, also have to prioritize. So you being here at 6 a.m., I mean, it's great, but it kind of shows me that you probably didn't get your work done during our normal business hours and probably weren't as productive as you should have been. You shouldn't have to get here at 6 a.m. and stay until like 8, 9 o'clock at night. I don't really recommend that, and it's not something that I agree with.
I think maybe after you get the job and you need time to learn and you want to kind of be ahead, or you need time to, I think that there's, as an intern, we expect for you to kind of balance, you have an end goal, you want to get your degree. So, but I think how you choose to after you get your role in whatever organization, I think some of those hours, I was one of those people, not during my internship, but certainly in my early career time, where I would do that. I would get there really early and stay late, not because I was necessarily trying to make an impression on my boss, but because there was a lot I didn't know, and because the day is involved in meetings and patient care, you didn't really have time to kind of decompress and kind of say, okay, so what just happened today, and let me kind of do a little bit of studying. So I think certainly there will be days where you have long hours, but you don't want to start that as an intern.
So I would completely agree, especially as an intern. If you show up early and you're here kind of before me or after me, I'm going to ask, what are you doing? Right? Like, what are you working on? I don't want you to sit just to sit. There's no reason for you to be here to sit in a chair, because that doesn't impress me. Right? So if you're doing something, if you're working on something and you're going to be here early, I'll say, how can I help you? What can I help you with? If you're learning something, that's different, but don't be there just to take up space in a chair. Yeah, I would definitely disagree with that.
Yeah, I was one of those residents that I showed up like early, but I did it to prepare. Or when, depending on the organization, some of my residents will work a 12-hour shift, but it's because they're shadowing the PCC of the emergency department, and they want to know what a 12-hour shift is for a nurse leader in the organization. So especially work-life balance is extremely important, because we don't want residents or interns to think like that's the culture of the organization. But we definitely want you to take it serious, that you're not so lax, because I've tried to have some residents be so lax where they don't even put in an 8-hour day. So you definitely don't want to give that impression. So it is a fine balance of, definitely working hard every single day, but making it meaningful work. It's not about the hours you put in, it's about the meaningful work and the value that you're bringing to the organization, and then the education and experience that we're giving you in turn.
Thank you so much. And should people have the cameras on or not in a virtual environment?
I always have my camera on. It's irregardless of what meeting I'm in or who I'm in a meeting with. Sometimes if I see that like I'm the only one with my camera on, then I'll turn my camera off. But I think it's always important to stay engaged, especially when we're so disconnected these days. It just helps build that connection that you don't necessarily have with people anymore. So that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I like to keep my camera on simply so I'm more self-aware to, not get distracted with other things or emails or things that come up. So for me, it's more of like a way to just build some discipline, because if I don't have my camera on, I'll be like, well, I can focus on this, or maybe step away and do something else. So it's just a way for me to just keep myself focused on the task at hand. And it's a way in my role now. I used to be an intern in my organization, and and as an intern and as an administrator, you have to set an example. So I think that if you do that early on in your career and show that discipline, I think you're going to be able to create pathways for yourself too. So I think keeping the camera on could encourage others to put their camera on as well too. You know, but like Ravina said, sometimes you're the only one on there. And many times I've gone in meetings and just been stubborn and said, you know what, I'm going to keep myself on the camera. And if I'm the only one, that's fine. At least it shows everyone else that I'm staying focused on the task at hand.
Right. So I
Thank you.
completely agree. Have the camera on if you're paying attention. If you're not paying attention, don't have the camera on. But I think as an intern, I think it's very important to have the camera on because this may be the only chance that you get your face in front of certain people that are not in the direct office that you are in, right? So you're trying to get your face out there. You're trying to show them, you know, who you are and that you're paying attention and what your intentions are. If somebody sees a new face on the, you know, board of people on there, they may ask, oh, who are you? They may not be the person like I am that looks at the participant list every single time. So if they see your face, you actually may make a new friend and get a new contact and somebody that may want to kind of participate in your journey and help you out.
Thank you. And then regarding social media presence, do they look at residents' social media profile?
I don't. I look at LinkedIn. I don't really dig deeper into social media. I think that that's, for me, a little personal. I do LinkedIn stalk though. So if someone has applied to the internship, they will often see that I looked at their profile on LinkedIn. And I actually encourage interns to do that too. If you are going into a meeting with someone, look at their LinkedIn. I don't think that you should be afraid that they can see that you looked at their LinkedIn. I think that it helps people understand that you've done your research and you know, understand who you're going into a meeting or an interview with.
I would recommend to play the social media aspect while you're in your internship very, very carefully. A lot of organizations, I mean, mine, we have a social media policy, and I would recommend that you guys look for that. If your organization has it, I would follow it. The last thing that you would want to do is get yourself in trouble over hashtag and then you tag the organization and it can be construed as, you know, not very positive. It's not worth it to make a career limiting move over something like that, especially when your career is just starting. So my recommendation is kind of back off during your internship on social media, especially if you reference the organization and focus more on a professional one, like Ravina mentioned, LinkedIn.
Okay, well, we are now at the end of our Q&A. Thank you to the panelists and attendees for joining us this evening. Everyone will be receiving a post-event survey. We would appreciate the feedback. Please visit our website to register for exciting upcoming events and follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you once again, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.